Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. The Auction of Destiny ****. In the sprawling intergalactic city of Xander Prime, a place where races from across the galaxy came to trade goods, knowledge, and sometimes lives, a market unlike any other was about to begin. The crowd was a mix of highborn nobles, wealthy merchants, and shadowy figures, each with their own purpose. Above it all, a massive arena of sleek metal stretched into the skies, illuminated by flickering neon lights. This was no ordinary auction. It was the buying and selling of sentient beings, many of whom had no choice but to be commodified. Today's auction was special, for the lot being sold was the fiercest of them all. At the center of the auction platform stood a towering, muscled figure, her skin a deep shade of bronze, covered in intricate tattoos that told the story of her people. She was an Amazon, a warrior born on the harsh planet of Gorith, a world known for its deadly creatures, rugged landscapes, and the battle-hardened women who ruled it. Her name was Lysandra, and she was one of the last of her kind, bred for war and combat from birth. Her eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the crowd with a quiet fury, but there was something more in them, something that spoke of untold stories of strength, but also of the vulnerability that came with being sold to the highest bidder. The auctioneer, a slick and polished individual with cybernetic enhancements, stood at the edge of the platform, his voice a smooth melody as he addressed the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a rare opportunity today. The last of the Garathian Amazons, a warrior capable of unmatched feats of strength, combat, and loyalty. She is yours to command. Let the bidding begin. Lysandra's heart raced, but her expression remained unchanged. She had fought in battles, taken down armies, and survived in the most hostile of environments. But this was different. She had never been sold like this before. Her entire life had been spent as a tool of war, a weapon created to conquer. Now she stood before strangers, to be bought and sold like any other commodity. As the bids started to rise, Lysandra's mind wandered. She had been raised to fight, to conquer, to never show weakness. But what was the point of all of it? She had seen her sisters fall in battle, torn apart by enemies they had been trained to defeat. And now she was here, sold into servitude. She wasn't even sure who her new master would be. It was the way of the galaxy. Stronger races bought and controlled the weaker ones. It was a never-ending cycle of exploitation. But then, something unexpected happened. A single voice cut through the rising bids, low and steady, yet filled with undeniable authority. "I'll take her." The crowd fell silent, and all eyes turned to the figure who had spoken. In the back, a solitary figure stood, unassuming yet brimming with something different from the rest of the attendees. He was a human, though not one who appeared to be a part of the elite or military circles. His clothes were simple, a faded jacket and worn boots, a stark contrast to the polished, extravagant outfits of the other bidders. His presence was quiet but commanding, like a storm waiting to break. The auctioneer blinked in surprise. "Pardon me, sir, but this is not a purchase for the faint of heart. She is a weapon, a warrior. You will need to prove you can handle." "I'll take her," the human repeated, his voice cutting through the tension. "No more bidding?" There was a long, uncomfortable pause before the auctioneer, clearly unsettled by this unexpected interruption, cleared his throat. "Very well. It seems the human has claimed the lot." A low murmur rippled through the crowd, many of them perplexed by this human who seemed to have no understanding of the gravity of the purchase he had just made. On Gorith, and in most parts of the galaxy, humans were seen as weak, small, fragile beings who had no place among the strong. And yet, here was one, casually making a purchase that many believed required a lifetime of wealth and influence to even dream of. Lysandra's eyes narrowed as she watched him. There was something different about him, though she couldn't quite place it. The other bidders had looked at her like a prize to be claimed, something to be used, but this human? His gaze didn't hold the same arrogance, the same hunger. Instead, it was focused, purposeful, but with a softness she wasn't used to. The auctioneer waved his hand, sealing the deal. "Very well, the human wins the auction. Lysandra the Amazon is now in his hands." Lysandra felt a flicker of something within her, a question, perhaps, or even a spark of hope. Was this the beginning of something else? Was this human different? As the crowd began to disperse, murmuring among themselves, Lysandra was led off the platform by two attendants. The human, standing to the side, waited patiently. He did not move toward her, did not show any sign of impatience. There was something unsettling about how calm he was, how unafraid. She was a warrior, a killing machine. She had been bred to fear nothing, but there was something about him that made her question everything she had ever known. Finally, Lysandra was brought to him. She stood before him, her towering form dwarfing the human, yet there was something in his stance that made her hesitate. The air between them was charged with an unspoken tension. "You," she said, her voice like steel, "what do you want with me?" The human met her gaze. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, there was something about them. They were full of determination, yes, but also something more. Something that made her wonder if this was truly the end of her story, or the beginning of something far more dangerous. "I don't want to own you," he said quietly. "I want you to have a choice." Her breath caught in her throat. This was a concept foreign to her, a choice. All her life there had been only one path: fight, survive, obey. But this human, this Earthling, was offering something she had never thought possible. "Your choice," he continued, "is yours alone. Fight for me if you will. Or fight against me. But it will be your decision." Lysandra stared at him, trying to process the words. Could it be? Could someone truly offer her freedom, freedom to choose her own path? It was a foreign thought, but it was there, lingering in the air between them. And in that moment, Lysandra's destiny began to shift, as a flicker of hope sparked within her warrior's heart. The choice ***. Lysandra stood before the human, her imposing figure a stark contrast to his slight build. Her sharp eyes studied him, trying to understand the depths of his words. Her mind raced. Could it be possible? Could anyone, especially a human, truly offer her a choice? A choice was a luxury she had never known. For as long as she could remember, her entire life had been shaped by survival, battle, and obedience. She had been bred to fight, to destroy, to never question orders. She had fought for her people, fought to protect her home, but never once had she been given the power to decide her own fate. The human didn't move as she examined him. There was a calmness in his posture, almost as if he were waiting for her to make the first move. Lysandra's gaze flickered to the attendants who had brought her to him. They stepped back, watching from a distance, though their presence remained like a shadow. The silence between them stretched out, heavy with the weight of her uncertainty. She could feel her instincts kicking in, every fiber of her being screamed to challenge him, to show her dominance. She was a warrior, after all, and no one had ever dared to speak to her as he had. But something within her held her back. Perhaps it was curiosity, or maybe something deeper, a longing she could no longer ignore. "Why?" she finally asked, her voice low and filled with disbelief. "Why offer me a choice? Why not just command me as all the others have?" The human didn't flinch. His dark eyes met hers with an intensity that almost made her question his motives. He seemed so different from the others she had encountered. Where others would have reveled in their newfound power over her, he appeared unthreatened by her presence. He didn't even seem to care about the size difference or her reputation as one of the fiercest warriors in the galaxy. "I'm not like them," he said simply, his tone unwavering. "I don't want to control you. I don't want to break you. I want you to choose your path, whatever that may be. You're not a tool to me, Lysandra. You're a person." His words cut through her like a blade. The notion of being seen as something more than an object of war was foreign to her. It didn't sit well in her mind, not because she didn't want it, but because she didn't know how to process it. She had spent her entire life as a weapon, an instrument of destruction. How could she be anything else? What was she beyond the battlefield? Could she even become something more? The human continued to stand in front of her, unwavering. There was no fear in his eyes, no hesitation. He was offering her something radical, something unheard of among the galaxy's elite. "I don't expect you to trust me," he said, his voice gentle yet firm. "I just want you to know that you don't have to follow anyone's orders unless you believe in them. You can fight for what you want, not because you're told to." Lysandra clenched her fists at her sides, her mind churning. She had been raised in a culture where loyalty was everything. She had fought alongside her sisters, each one of them bound by a code of honor that demanded unquestioning allegiance to their people. But now, this human was offering her freedom. The very concept seemed absurd. How could a warrior like her, someone bred for combat, someone who had killed countless foes, ever hope to live without a master, without a command? "What would you have me do?" she asked finally, her voice rough with the weight of her doubt. She wasn't sure what she wanted. She wasn't sure what she was asking for. But something in her stirred, a flicker of hope, a glimmer of possibility. The human smiled, and in that moment, Lysandra realized that she didn't understand him at all. His smile wasn't the smug grin of a conqueror, it was a smile of understanding, of someone who had seen something in her that even she hadn't recognized yet. "I'm not going to tell you what to do," he replied. I'm not going to ask you to follow me blindly. I just want you to see that you have a choice. That's all. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. It was sleek, unassuming, nothing like the elaborate technology she had seen in the hands of the powerful or the wealthy. He handed it to her, and she instinctively took it, her fingers brushing against his as she did. The touch was brief but electric, sending a strange shiver through her. This device, he explained, is a way for you to communicate with me. If you need something, if you want to leave or if you need help, press the button on it. I'll be there. But I'm not going to force you into anything. This is yours, Lysandra. She held the device in her hand, staring down at it. It felt weighty not because of its mass but because of what it represented. It was a symbol of freedom, a lifeline, and yet, it also felt like a burden. She had always been the one to make decisions on the battlefield, to determine the fate of others. But now, someone was offering her the power to decide her own fate, and it terrified her. Why do you trust me? She asked, the words slipping out before she could stop them. The human's gaze softened. I don't know if I trust you yet. But I know you're capable of making your own decisions. And I trust that you'll make the right one, whatever that may be. Lysandra's heart skipped a beat at his words. Could it really be that simple? Could she, the warrior who had killed without remorse, the fighter who had lost so much, truly have the power to shape her own destiny? She looked up at him, her piercing eyes searching for any hint of deception, but found none. There was no manipulation, no hidden agenda in his words, only sincerity. He didn't seem to understand the complexity of her existence, the weight of her past. But in that moment it didn't matter. He was offering her something priceless, the chance to choose her future. Lysandra didn't respond immediately. Instead, she pressed the button on the device, her finger lingering for a moment before it clicked. A soft beep echoed in the air. The human's eyes flickered to her hand, then back to her face, watching her closely. What now? She asked quietly, her voice barely more than a whisper. Now? The human smiled again, his expression one of quiet determination. Now you take your first step. For the first time in her life, Lysandra felt like she was standing at the edge of something vast, a future she could choose for herself. The uncertainty was still there, gnawing at her, but so was something else. Something new. And with that, Lysandra felt the first spark of hope. Hope that she could change her destiny. Uncharted paths ***. The days following her strange and unexpected liberation passed in a blur. Lysandra had never known a life without structure, without the unyielding expectations of her people. Her life had always been defined by the brutal cycles of war, the constant march from one battle to the next. But now, here she was, in the unfamiliar silence of freedom, trying to make sense of a world that no longer seemed to revolve around her abilities as a weapon. The human, Eli, as he had introduced himself, was nothing like the men who had bought and sold slaves like her. He was patient, kind, and yet, there was something in him that was unmistakably capable of leading. His very presence seemed to pull others together, and he had shown her nothing but respect since their first meeting. He didn't ask her to perform menial tasks, didn't demand her to fight in his name. Instead he offered her choices. Each day Lysandra tried to understand what he saw in her. Why had he chosen her? He was a man of few words, but every conversation felt like a test, an invitation to open up to a possibility she had never imagined. The ship they traveled on was modest, nothing like the grand warships of the elite. Eli's vessel was small but efficient, designed for exploration, not conquest. She found herself spending more time in the ship's training room, a place filled with holographic combat simulations and strange alien weapons that she had never seen before. The human had insisted that she use it whenever she needed to, that it was her space to hone her skills. At first she had thought he was simply offering her a place to keep her deadly instincts sharp, but now she wasn't so sure. Eli often watched her from the doorway, his presence quiet but always there. He never asked her to stop, never told her to tone it down. If anything, he seemed impressed by her raw power, by the skill she brought to every fight. But it was in these moments that Lysandra began to wonder what her true strength was. What could she become if she wasn't merely fighting to survive, to destroy? What would it mean to fight for something else? One evening, after a particularly intense training session, Lysandra found herself sitting alone on the observation deck, watching the stars. The vastness of space always unsettled her, reminded her of how small she truly was in the grand scheme of things. Yet for the first time she didn't feel insignificant. There was something intoxicating about the idea that she could chart her own course through this infinite universe. Eli found her there, as he often did when she was deep in thought. He stepped into the room, his footsteps soft but steady. The hum of the ship's engines filled the space between them. "You've been quiet today," Eli remarked, his voice gentle. "Something on your mind?" Lysandra didn't immediately answer. She was still grappling with the idea that she could be more than just a tool for destruction. Her fingers curled around the railing as she stared out into the void. "I'm trying to understand why you trust me," she said at last, her voice low. "Why you've chosen to keep me by your side, when you could have chosen anyone else. What makes me worth this? Freedom?" Eli was silent for a moment, and when he finally spoke, his words were steady and sure. "I'm not sure I can explain it in a way that makes sense. But I've seen you, seen what you can do. I've seen the strength in you that isn't just physical. It's in your mind and the way you think. I didn't choose you because you're a weapon, Lysandra. I chose you because I believe you have the potential to be something greater." Her brow furrowed, confusion crossing her features. "Something greater?" she repeated, almost in disbelief. He nodded, taking a step closer. "Yes. I see someone who's capable of leading, someone who could build something. Something that isn't based on violence or domination but on respect and understanding. You've spent your whole life fighting, but you've never had the chance to create something that lasts. What if you could? What if you could fight for something bigger than yourself?" Lysandra's eyes narrowed, processing his words. "I was bred to fight, to conquer. I've never known anything else. What could I build? I've watched entire civilizations crumble. I've seen my people destroyed in battle. I don't know how to do anything else." "You know how to survive," Eli said, his tone gentle but firm. "And you've learned how to adapt. You're more than your past, Lysandra. What you've been through doesn't define who you can become. You have the power to change. And that's why I trust you." She couldn't understand why he was so certain, why he believed in her when she couldn't even begin to believe in herself. He had no idea what it had been like, what it was like to lose everything, to watch her sisters die on the battlefield, to be cast aside as a mere tool of war. But Eli wasn't asking her to forget. He wasn't asking her to let go of her past. He was simply offering her the chance to shape her future. Lysandra stood up, the weight of his words pressing against her chest. "I'm not sure I can be what you think I am," she admitted, her voice rough. "I don't know if I can change. I don't even know who I am without the war." Eli gave a small smile, a look of understanding on his face. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. You don't have to be anything except yourself. But if you want to, we can figure it out together." His words, simple as they were, struck a chord deep inside her. For the first time in her life, Lysandra realized that she didn't have to define herself by what others expected her to be. She didn't have to be just a weapon. She could be more. And so, she made a decision. "Teach me," she said, her voice firm. "Teach me how to be something else. Something better." Eli's smile widened, and for the first time, Lysandra felt something stir within her that wasn't just the thirst for combat. It was hope. Hope that she could break free from the chains of her past and become something new. The following days saw her begin to take small steps toward this new identity. Eli introduced her to the ways of diplomacy, to the art of negotiation and compromise. She trained in strategy not for war but for leadership. He took her to peaceful worlds, places where the focus wasn't on battle or conquest, but on community, innovation, and cooperation. Lysandra found herself astonished by what she saw. There were no weapons here, only people working together for a common purpose, building futures instead of destroying them. It wasn't easy. Every instinct in her screamed to return to what she knew best: war. But the more she saw of this new world, the more she began to understand. Strength could be more than just the ability to break and destroy. It could be the power to protect, to inspire, to unite. And with each passing day, Lysandra felt the weight of her past grow lighter, her future clearer. The warrior had not disappeared, but she was evolving into something more: a leader, a protector. She was beginning to understand that her destiny was not written in blood and battle. It was something she could write for herself. The journey was just beginning. The first test ***. Lysandra's transformation was not swift, nor was it easy. For weeks, she had immersed herself in new ways of thinking, constantly torn between the instinct to fight and the budding realization that there was another path. She practiced diplomacy, but she didn't always understand the nuance. She trained in strategy, but her mind remained wired for war. Eli, patient as ever, never rushed her. He gave her time, but he also knew that there would come a moment when she would need to confront the life she had left behind. That moment arrived sooner than either of them expected. One quiet afternoon, as they were drifting through the dense asteroid belt of the Milos system, the ship's sensors blared a sudden alarm. Eli and Lysandra were in the navigation room when the warning lights flashed red, signaling an incoming threat. The system they were in was known for its quiet, isolated nature, with very few ships traveling through it. This intrusion was an anomaly. Eli immediately began to assess the situation, his fingers dancing across the console. "Pirates," he muttered, narrowing his eyes. "This isn't a random encounter. They've been tracking us for days." Lysandra felt a surge of adrenaline. The old instincts honed through years of combat kicked in. Her pulse quickened, and she could feel the familiar hum of her muscles, the readiness to fight. This was what she knew. This was what she was good at. A part of her wanted to rush into action, to engage the threat head-on and demonstrate her superiority as a warrior. But another part, one that had been growing stronger since she first met Eli, held her back. "Shouldn't we just avoid them?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with a hint of concern. "If they're pirates, they might just want the cargo. We don't have to fight." Eli's gaze flickered toward her, reading the conflict in her eyes. "We could avoid them, but that could lead to more problems down the road. Pirates like these aren't just after resources. They target anyone they think is weak, and they'll keep coming back if they sense fear. We're not running away." Lysandra clenched her jaw, a mix of emotions swirling inside her. She had spent weeks learning that violence wasn't always the answer, that there were other ways to solve conflicts. But now, faced with the reality of a direct threat, the pull of her past was undeniable. She could feel the hunger for battle rising within her. "Then what do you want me to do?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "I need you to think, Lysandra," Eli replied, his voice calm but firm. "We can't just rush in. These pirates might be dangerous, but they're not invincible. We have the advantage. But I need you to help me outsmart them." The ship rocked suddenly, a blast of energy hitting the outer shields. The impact was minor, but the message was clear. The pirates had found them. "Right?" Lysandra muttered under her breath, shaking off her inner turmoil. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to refocus. She was no longer just a warrior. She was more than that now. And in this moment she had to remember the lessons Eli had taught her. "Okay," she said with newfound resolve, "let's outsmart them." Eli's eyes lit up with approval. "I knew you had it in you." He quickly mapped out their escape route, but it was clear that the pirates had already anticipated such a move. Their ship was fast and maneuverable, and they were closing in on them. The problem wasn't just the pirates' firepower, it was that they were ready to chase them to the ends of the system if they didn't do something drastic. "We'll need to engage them, but not directly," Eli said, adjusting the ship's trajectory. "We'll use the asteroid field as cover and get close enough to disable their engines without getting in range of their weapons." Lysandra nodded, taking her place at the tactical station. "How close do you want to get?" "Close," Eli said with a smirk. "But not too close. You're the expert on that." She couldn't help but grin. Despite everything, Eli's confidence in her abilities made her feel something she hadn't felt in years: trust. Trust in herself, in him, and in their ability to handle the situation as a team. This wasn't a battle for dominance, it was a battle for survival. And if they were going to succeed, it wouldn't be through sheer force. It would be through intelligence and coordination. The ship darted through the asteroid field, narrowly avoiding collisions as Lysandra monitored their progress. The pirates had followed them into the field, likely assuming they could outmaneuver their quarry. But what they didn't expect was the precision with which Eli piloted the ship, using the rocks as cover and pulling off sharp turns that left the pirates scrambling to keep up. "Prepare for a blast," Eli called out as they neared their target. "I'm going to disable their shields. When I give the signal, we'll drop in close. You'll need to take out their engines before they can react." Lysandra's heart rate accelerated. This wasn't a mission where she could simply overwhelm the enemy with force. She had to be quick, calculated, and precise. Every movement had to count. The familiar weight of her training, the hours spent in combat simulations, now took on new meaning. This wasn't just a fight for glory, it was a fight for something more important. It was a test of everything she had learned. "Understood," she replied, her voice steady as she prepared the weapon systems. The pirates were closing in. Lysandra could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation of a battle she had fought many times before. But this time the stakes were different. This time it wasn't about who was stronger, it was about who could think faster, who could outmaneuver the other. Eli initiated the first move, sending a pulse that disabled the pirate ship's shields. The move was sharp, calculated, and precise. The pirate ship faltered for just a moment, and that was all Lysandra needed. She fired the ship's laser cannons, aiming directly for the engines. The blast hit true, and the pirate vessel lurched as its engines sputtered and died. "They're disabled," Lysandra reported, her voice filled with a rush of exhilaration. But they're not out yet. Eli nodded, his face set in determination. We need to get them to surrender or we'll have to finish this. Lysandra's mind raced as she assessed their options. The pirates weren't helpless yet. They still had weapons, still had the means to retaliate. But without their engines they were sitting ducks. A communication signal from the pirate ship suddenly came through. The screen flickered, and a grizzled face appeared, eyes flashing with anger and frustration. You think you can just steal from us and get away with it? You don't know who you're dealing with? Lysandra felt a surge of adrenaline once more, but this time, it was tempered with calm. She knew this was her moment to prove that she was not just a warrior. She was more. We're not stealing from you, Lysandra said coolly, her voice cutting through the static. We're saving you from a worse fate. You're alive right now because we let you be. You're going to give us your coordinates and leave this system. If you ever come back, we won't be so merciful. The pirate's expression faltered. He clearly hadn't expected her response. Lysandra's calmness, her confidence, made him hesitate. Do it, she ordered, her voice leaving no room for argument. For a long moment there was only silence. Then the pirate finally relented, his image disappearing from the screen. They're retreating, Eli said with a smile. You did it? Lysandra didn't feel the rush of victory. Instead she felt something new, a quiet satisfaction, the knowledge that she had fought for a purpose other than survival. She had used her skills to protect, to preserve life, not destroy it. She turned to Eli, who was watching her with quiet approval. I did it, she whispered as if she were still processing the weight of it. I really did it. Eli placed a hand on her shoulder, his gaze unwavering. You did. And you're just getting started? For the first time in her life, Lysandra felt like she was on the right path, not to conquer but to lead. And in that moment she knew that this was just the beginning. Seeds of Unity ***. The pirate encounter, though brief, had an effect far deeper than either Eli or Lysandra had expected. In the aftermath, as the pirate ship limped off into the void, their ship remained in the silence of space. Eli had been content, giving Lysandra space to reflect on the encounter. He had expected her to feel victorious, perhaps elated by the success of their tactic and the way she had handled the negotiation. But instead, Lysandra was quiet, deep in thought. The rawness of the battle and her decision to hold her power in check had left her conflicted, yet hopeful. The experience, the victory, was unlike any she had known before. For the first time, Lysandra had fought not to conquer, not to gain an upper hand but to protect. To guide others to make the right choice. It was as if she had touched a part of herself that had long been dormant, the part of her that wasn't a weapon but a leader. Days passed as they ventured through unexplored star systems, far from the battles of her past. Eli and Lysandra had spent the time in quiet reflection, both adapting to the rhythms of their new dynamic. Eli had continued to teach her the ways of diplomacy, but now, there was a deeper connection between them. She was beginning to understand the delicate dance of politics, the intricate web of alliances and enmities that defined the galaxy's balance of power. It was on the fringes of the Zarnex Nebula that they made contact with their first true challenge since the pirate raid. A transmission came in, distorted, heavy with static but still audible. The voice was faint but clear enough to be understood. This is Captain Lissa of the Veleron Consortium. We've detected your vessel and, you are not alone. You will be approached by several ships in the next few hours. Do not attempt to flee or engage. Your survival will depend on your willingness to cooperate. We are no friends of the Federation, but we do not tolerate trespassers. Eli's brows furrowed as he looked over the transmission, then glanced at Lysandra. The Veleron Consortium. A pirate coalition. They're even worse than the ones we just faced. They're known for extortion, enslaving entire populations, selling advanced weaponry to the highest bidder. Lysandra stood, her expression unreadable. The old fire of battle was beginning to rise within her again. It was almost like a challenge, one she had no interest in backing down from. But she had changed. She had to remind herself that there was more at stake now. There was a bigger picture. We can't just fight them off like we did before, Lysandra said, her voice firm. These people are organized. And they've been known to enslave populations. If we get involved, we risk much more than our lives. Eli nodded, his lips tight. Exactly. But we can't run either. If we show weakness, they'll exploit it. We need a plan. Lysandra's mind worked quickly. This was no longer just a matter of being faster, stronger, or more skilled. This was about controlling the situation, about leveraging every advantage they could find. She thought of the knowledge she had gained, of diplomacy, of leadership, and of what Eli had taught her. It was time to put it into action. Can we outsmart them? Lysandra asked, looking at Eli. We don't have to fight them. What if we could make them believe they are the ones in control, while we're actually positioning ourselves to make them surrender? Eli gave her a long, appraising look. I knew you'd come around. But this won't be easy. The consortium is massive and unpredictable. We have to give them something they want, but make sure they don't take too much. You've got a sharp mind, Lysandra. It's time to put it to the test. The next few hours were filled with preparation. Lysandra helped Eli analyze the best ways to handle the situation. They scanned their surroundings, using the nebulous clouds of gas and dust to conceal their movements. Their goal was not to overpower but to outmaneuver. If they could make the consortium believe they had something of value, they could use that to gain an advantage. The ship's weapons were set to stun, not kill. They weren't going to destroy anything. They needed the consortium to understand that their goal was not destruction but survival. The next phase of their plan would require careful negotiation and a willingness to give ground, but not concede everything. As the consortium's ships approached, Eli turned to Lysandra, who was overseeing the communication array. This is it. They'll be within range in a few minutes. You take the lead. They need to believe you're in charge. Lysandra nodded, her jaw set in determination. She had learned how to think strategically, how to anticipate an enemy's move, but now it was time to test that knowledge. This wasn't a battlefield of warriors, but a battlefield of wits. The first consortium vessel hailed them with a low, grating voice. This is Captain Lyssa of the Veleron Consortium. You are in violation of consortium space. Prepare to be boarded. Lysandra's hand was steady as she responded, projecting confidence. Captain Lyssa, I'm fully aware of the territory I've entered. However, I'm not just some random trespasser. I represent a powerful faction with resources you can't even begin to imagine. You're better off negotiating with me than trying to take us down. There was a long silence before Captain Lyssa responded, her voice filled with suspicion. And what exactly do you think you have that we would want? Lysandra smiled, her confidence unfaltering. I can offer you a fleet. Not just any fleet, a fleet with advanced human technology. It's not something you can get from anyone else. And I can guarantee it will make your position in this sector uncontested. All I ask is that you let us go on our way without incident. This is your chance to align with something much larger than your consortium. Lyssa's laughter crackled through the comms. Bold words. But I'm not so easily fooled. What makes you think you can afford to make such an offer? Lysandra's eyes flickered toward Eli, who gave her a silent nod. Let's just say, I know who you've been dealing with. You've been trying to broker deals with the Zarnex Federation, haven't you? What if I told you that I know a way to undermine them? To outsmart them without lifting a single finger? The line was silent for a long moment, the tension thick. Lysandra could feel the eyes of the consortium on them, waiting for her next move, testing her resolve. Finally, Captain Lyssa spoke again, her voice much more measured. You know too much for us to dismiss you. We'll hold off on the boarding. But you'd better not be lying. We'll be watching. Lysandra's heart raced, but she kept her expression impassive. Good. We'll talk further when the time is right. The comms cut off and Lysandra exhaled, feeling a mixture of relief and exhilaration. It had worked. She had played her hand, and for now the consortium had taken the bait. Eli let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. That was impressive. I didn't think they'd back off so quickly. You really do have a gift for this? Lysandra smiled faintly, the thrill of the negotiation still pulsing through her. This isn't over. But we bought ourselves time. Time to think. Time to make them believe we're worth more as allies than enemies. Eli placed a hand on her shoulder. You didn't just win a battle today, Lysandra. You've changed the entire game. This is the start of something big. Lysandra felt the weight of his words sink in. She had done more than simply survive. She had shifted the balance of power, not with her strength but with her mind. The warrior within her hadn't disappeared. She had simply learned how to wield her strength in new ways. And in this galaxy of shifting alliances, dangerous factions and constant threats, she had taken the first step in becoming the leader she was always meant to be. The battle was far from over. But now Lysandra knew one thing for certain. She was ready to fight for something greater. The cost of power ***. In the days that followed their tense standoff with the Veleron Consortium, Lysandra and Eli drifted through the void, their ship skimming past glowing nebulae and distant stars. They were waiting for the consortium to make their move. Lysandra spent her time training, refining the strategic skills she had started to master, while Eli dove deeper into the ship's systems, preparing for the inevitable confrontation that would come when the consortium tested their bluff. But the tension was palpable, even in the quiet moments between them. Eli could sense the change in Lysandra, how she was becoming less the warrior she had been and more the leader she was destined to be. Still, there was something beneath the surface that made him wary. Lysandra was not the same person who had boarded his ship so many weeks ago. The lessons had been hard, the tests grueling, and now she bore the weight of decisions that would shape the galaxy's future. The quiet was shattered when their sensors flared once more. A series of ships were approaching, their signatures unmistakable. The consortium had arrived. Lysandra's hand went to the tactical display as she stood by Eli, her mind racing. The ships were not just any consortium vessels. These were advanced warships, fully equipped with weapons capable of devastating an entire fleet. The consortium had come to test them to see if they were truly what they claimed to be. It was no longer a game of negotiations. The consortium was taking this as a challenge. "Brace for impact," Eli said, his voice calm despite the danger. "They'll try to provoke us, see if we'll back down." Lysandra nodded, her expression hardening. She had been waiting for this moment, knowing that their strategy of bluffing couldn't last forever. Now it was time to take control. Either they would succeed or fail, but there was no turning back. The first of the consortium ships hailed them, and the screen flickered to life, showing the familiar face of Captain Lyssa. Her expression was colder now, sharper, as though the encounter had made her cautious. "You've made a powerful claim, Earthling," Captain Lyssa began, her voice low and dangerous. "But words are cheap. We don't trust your promises. You've drawn attention to yourself, and that's never a good thing. You'll find that even a fleet of human technology can't save you if you're facing the wrath of the consortium." Lysandra stepped forward, her voice steady as she replied. "I didn't come here to make threats, Captain. I came here to give you an opportunity. You could join us, align with the resources we've promised, and we'll wipe out anyone who stands in our way. Or you could try to destroy us and risk everything. Your choice." Lyssa's lip curled in a semblance of a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're playing a dangerous game. If you think you can bluff your way through this, you're wrong. You're not the only ones with power in this galaxy, Earthling. You'll soon find that out the hard way." Before Lysandra could respond, another voice cut in, this time coming from a new figure in the consortium fleet. A massive warship moved into view, a behemoth in the darkness of space, its hull scarred from battle. The transmission cut in, and a tall figure with short, silver hair and piercing eyes appeared on the screen. "I don't care about your promises or your fleets," the man said, his voice like ice. "I'm General Halen of the Veleron Consortium's military division. I've seen your kind before. Weak, fragile, and in need of destruction. We will take what we want, and you will regret ever stepping into our path." Lysandra felt a cold fury bubbling within her, but she didn't let it show. She had faced enemies like this before, people who relied on brute strength and intimidation. But she wasn't just a warrior anymore. She was a strategist, a leader. And she would not back down. "You think we're weak?" she asked, her voice filled with quiet menace. "You don't understand what you're up against. The Federation may be powerful, but they're not invincible. We can outsmart them. We can outlast you. And when you've overstretched yourselves, when your empire crumbles under the weight of your own arrogance, you'll remember who gave you the chance to walk away." General Halen's face twitched with disdain, but before he could reply, another transmission came in. This one was from an unexpected source, one Lysandra had hoped never to hear from again. "Lysandra," the voice came through, crackling with static. "I never thought I'd be the one to say this, but you've got my attention." The transmission cleared slightly, revealing a familiar face. A face Lysandra had once trusted, once admired, Commander Phelan, a former ally and leader of the Zarnex Federation's military division. But there was something off about him now, something in his eyes, a coldness that hadn't been there before. "What are you doing here, Phelan?" Lysandra's voice was a whisper of disbelief, but her hand was steady on the console. "I'm not here to play games," Phelan replied, his voice steady. "You've taken a dangerous path, Lysandra. But I've always respected your strength. The Federation isn't what it used to be. They've become complacent, slow. You've got the power to break through the deadlock we've been stuck in. If you side with the consortium, we'll give you more than you can imagine. But if you choose to remain loyal to the Federation..." He let the sentence hang in the air, the threat implicit. Lysandra's pulse quickened, but she didn't let it show. Phelan was trying to manipulate her, but the temptation to join the Federation, to align with the consortium and take control of the galaxy's future, was strong. She could feel the pull. This was the power she had always wanted, the ability to shape the fate of billions with a single choice. But it came with a cost, and that cost was not something she could ignore. She turned to Eli, her gaze hard and focused. I won't join you, Phelan. I won't side with the consortium. The Federation has its flaws, but we're not going to let you tear everything apart just for power. You've lost your way. Phelan's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing. You're making a mistake, Lysandra. You'll regret this. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the room in silence. Eli stepped closer to Lysandra, his voice soft but firm. What do we do now? Lysandra stood still for a long moment, her mind racing. She had just turned away from everything she once believed in. From the Federation. From Phelan. She had made her choice. But in doing so, she had taken a step into the unknown. I think we've made our intentions clear, she said, finally breaking the silence. Now we have to live with the consequences. But even as she said the words, she knew they were only the beginning. The consortium was no longer just a group of pirates. They were a threat that would not be ignored. And the Federation, now aware of her betrayal, would not let her go without a fight. The price of power was steep, and Lysandra was only beginning to understand the true cost. As the consortium ships closed in on them, Lysandra felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. There was no turning back. The galaxy was at war, and she had just declared her allegiance. It was a war that would test her in ways she had never imagined. A war where the cost of victory might be everything she held dear. And yet there was no other choice. She had come too far to turn back now. The first shots rang out across the cold expanse of space. The storm breaks ***. The first salvo tore through the silence of space with a deafening roar. It was a warning shot, a statement more than an attempt to hit. Lysandra's hands clenched around the ship's controls as the consortium's fleet surrounded them. Their weapons were aimed, and the cold metal of their ships glinted menacingly in the distance. The storm had arrived, and there was no turning back now. Eli's voice broke the tension in the cockpit. Lysandra, we can't hold out against this many. We need to either break their formation or we'll be sitting ducks. Lysandra nodded, her mind already working, analyzing the situation with the calm precision she had cultivated over the past weeks. She had seen battles before, fought them, won them, but this was different. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about reshaping everything. Her actions in the coming moments would determine the course of the galaxy. How much time do we have before they unleash full firepower? She asked, glancing over to Eli, who was busy inputting commands into the ship's systems. Not much. They've got us locked in. We can either talk our way out or we fight our way out. Your call? She could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her. For so long she had been the warrior, the one who fought and conquered, who took what she needed by force. But now she had something far more powerful at her disposal: strategy, foresight, and the ability to shape the future with a single move. I won't fight them, Lysandra said firmly. Not yet. We still have cards to play. She turned to the tactical display, her eyes scanning the ships surrounding them. The consortium's formation was tight, organized, but there were gaps, weaknesses in their positions. She needed to act quickly or their luck would run out. Get us in close, Lysandra ordered. Stay just out of their weapons range. We need to make them think we're desperate. Let's create an opening. Eli glanced at her, raising an eyebrow but following her instructions. His hands danced across the controls, bringing the ship into a narrow formation, closing the distance between them and the enemy. The consortium ships tightened their ranks, clearly expecting a full-on assault. But what they didn't expect was Lysandra's next move. Prepare for a hard turn, Lysandra ordered. And cut power to the engines at the last second. Eli hesitated for only a moment before executing the maneuver. The ship jerked violently as they completed the turn, suddenly dropping in velocity, the momentary loss of power creating a false vulnerability. It was a gamble, but it worked. The consortium ships, eager to destroy them, overcompensated and fired early. Their shots missed by a wide margin, and the energy from their weapons reflected off the ship's hull, creating a series of explosions in the distance. But none of them hit their mark. Lysandra took a deep breath, realizing the risks of her plan had just become clear. They were now in the heat of the storm, surrounded by enemies who were willing to crush them for any perceived weakness. We've got their attention, but we're not out of the woods yet, Eli muttered, quickly adjusting their course to avoid more fire. They'll figure out what we're doing soon. Just keep them on edge, Lysandra replied, her voice unwavering. I'll need a few more minutes. She wasn't just playing a game of cat and mouse. What she was doing now was far more dangerous. She was baiting them, forcing the consortium to miscalculate, to underestimate her. She had studied them, knew how they operated, how they thought. Their arrogance was their downfall, and she would use that against them. Her mind flashed back to her conversations with Eli. The lessons, the teachings, every strategy he had shared, every tactic. They had spent hours preparing for something like this. She had learned from him, yes, but also from herself. She had learned that true power didn't come from brute strength alone. It came from understanding and exploiting the weaknesses of your enemies. From staying one step ahead always. She glanced back at the tactical readout. The consortium ships were forming a new pattern, clearly expecting the ship to attempt a retreat. It was a trap. A miscalculation. Get ready, Eli, Lysandra said, her voice low but filled with an intensity that could not be ignored. I'm going to make them pay. In a split second she made her move. The ship's weapon systems activated, and the entire room hummed with energy. She had been waiting for the right moment, and now that moment had arrived. The consortium ships were scattered across their perimeter, but they had positioned themselves too predictably. Lysandra ordered the ship to shift into a new trajectory, taking advantage of the gaps in the enemy's formation. As their targeting systems locked on, she fired. The first blast was precise, a clean shot that disabled the lead ship's engines, sending it spiraling out of control. The second shot was even more devastating, targeting the weapon systems of another ship, rendering it useless in a burst of electrical discharges. The consortium was shaken. Their coordination faltered. This wasn't the first time they had underestimated their opponents, but it was the first time a single ship had broken through their ranks so effectively. Nice shot, Eli said, his eyes widening in admiration as he monitored the damage. But Lysandra's attention remained sharp. She wasn't done. Not yet. Focus on the rear, she ordered as she saw their flanks becoming more vulnerable. The consortium ships were trying to reorganize, trying to call reinforcements. Take out their communication systems? Eli complied without hesitation, firing a volley that took out the communications relay of one of the larger ships, sending shockwaves through the fleet's command chain. Another ship lost its targeting capabilities, creating chaos as its weapons fired wildly into the void. The consortium fleet was now in disarray. The once powerful and coordinated attack had become a fragmented mess. They hadn't expected a single ship to be so capable, and that uncertainty was what Lysandra had been waiting for. We're breaking them, Lysandra muttered, watching as the remaining ships scattered. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since they'd engaged, she felt a flicker of hope. She wasn't just surviving this fight, she was winning. The transmission came through again, Captain Lyssa, now visibly agitated, her voice laced with disbelief. What is this? Who are you? This isn't a fight anymore, this is madness. Lysandra's eyes narrowed as she prepared her final move. This is reality, Captain. You've made your choice. You can either surrender now or risk losing everything. Lyssa hesitated, and for a moment, Lysandra thought she could see the faintest glimmer of hesitation. But before she could speak again, a new voice cut in, Phelan's voice, distorted by static, but filled with a cold certainty. You've made a fool of yourself, Lysandra. You think you can control this? The Federation will crush you just as we've crushed your enemies before. Lysandra's hand tightened around the console. You're wrong, Phelan. The galaxy doesn't belong to you, or to anyone who thinks they can control it through fear. This is my galaxy now. And I'll burn whatever it takes to keep it from falling into the hands of tyrants. The connection was severed, and Lysandra turned her attention back to the fight. She had just declared war, not on the consortium, not on the Federation, but on the entire system that had kept the galaxy divided for so long. The storm was only beginning, and Lysandra was ready to face it head-on. As the consortium ships retreated, their morale shattered, Lysandra felt the weight of the galaxy shift. She wasn't just a warrior anymore. She was a symbol of change. The future was unwritten, but one thing was certain. It was hers to shape. And nothing, not even the storms that loomed on the horizon, could stop her now. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.